All right, let's talk about the real Wolf of Wall Street. Today, we're going to break down the unbelievable true story of Jordan Belfort. You know, the guy who scammed America, got insanely rich, and then, well, he sold his story right back to us as entertainment. It's a wild ride.
And really, this is the craziest part of the whole story. Think about it. A massive financial crime that just destroyed thousands of lives. And what does he get? Less than 2 years in a minimum security prison. And after that, he becomes more famous than ever before. So how on earth did this all happen? Let's get into it.
Okay, so to really get the scam, you have to understand the man behind it. Jordan Belfort wasn't some Wall Street legacy kid. Nope, he came from Bayside, Queens, but he had this ambition that was just way too big for his neighborhood.
And you could see this pattern pretty early on. I mean, at just 16, he wasn't just selling Italian ices on the beach. He built a little business that made $20,000. He even gave dental school a shot. But legend has it the dean told the class it wasn't the way to get rich, so he walked out on the very first day. Then he tried selling meat door to door, and that went totally bankrupt. But all these failures, they taught him something really, really important.
What he figured out was his superpower wasn't selling meat, it was just selling. Period. The product itself didn't matter one bit. It could be steaks, it could be stocks. He could convince anyone to buy anything. He just needed a product with a way, way bigger payout. And, well, that's what led him right to Wall Street.
So he had a quick job at a legit firm, but that blew up with the 1987 market crash. And that's when Belfort found his, let's call it, true calling in the wild, totally unregulated world of penny stocks. This is where he built his empire, the infamous Stratton Oakmont.
And you gotta love the contrast here. The name, Stratton Oakmont, sounds so prestigious, right? Like some 100-year-old firm your grandfather would invest with. But the reality? It was a chaotic boiler room in a Long Island strip mall with a bunch of mismatched desks and zero rules. It was pure theater from the very beginning.
His hiring strategy was just as clever. He wasn't looking for guys with finance degrees from Harvard. No way. He wanted the neighborhood hustlers, the bartenders, the college dropouts, basically anyone who was hungry and he could shape into a sales machine. He didn't need thinkers. He needed closers.
So how did this whole thing actually work? How did they make so much money? Let's break down the crime itself. It's a classic scheme, and it's called the pump and dump.
The whole process was actually pretty simple and just brutal. Here's how it went. First, Belfort and his inner circle would secretly buy up huge chunks of some worthless penny stock. Step 2, he'd unleash his army of salespeople on the phones. Their only job was to create a massive fake frenzy, driving that stock price up, up, up. That's the pump. And then, right when it hit the peak, Belfort and his buddies would sell everything they owned, the dump, making a fortune and leaving all their clients holding basically worthless stock.
And this is what makes it so awful. They weren't going after rich investors who could take a hit. They were targeting working-class people. We're talking teachers, retirees, parents, people Wall Street usually ignored. They sold them a dream, and it turned into an absolute nightmare.
But you know, the scam wasn't just about making the money. Oh no, it was about spending it in the most insane, over-the-top ways you can imagine. The culture at Stratton Oakmont became, well, legendary. I mean, just look at the suits. Brokers were basically forced to wear $2,000 suits, all to look the part. The office itself was just a whirlwind of testosterone, loud music, and, let's just say, a whole lot of drugs. It was a complete carnival of greed, and it was all paid for with stolen money. And this quote was basically his daily sermon. He built this almost cult-like atmosphere. If you were a top seller, you were a god. You got the bonuses, the fancy cars, the Rolexes, but if you weren't, you were publicly shamed and out the door. The only things that mattered were loyalty to him and fear of failing.
But here's the thing about an empire built on lies, it can't last forever. And by the mid-90s, the whole thing started to unravel. The signs of collapse were just everywhere.
For starters, the SEC started sniffing around, noticing some really suspicious activity. Then the complaints from investors started flooding in, and Belfort himself, he was spinning out of control. He literally crashed his helicopter and sank his giant yacht. But the real problem for him was a quiet, really determined FBI agent named Gregory Coleman who started pulling at all the loose threads.
And this was his biggest mistake. Even though he knew he was being investigated, his ego got the best of him. He tried to illegally wire a couple $1 million to a secret account in Switzerland, but the FBI was listening in. They traced that transfer, And that one single moment of pure arrogance, that's what gave them everything they needed to take the whole operation down.
So the chase was over. But Jordan Belfort's story, it was far from done. In fact, his arrest, his sentence, and what happened next, his transformation from criminal to celebrity, that might be the most unbelievable part of this whole thing.
So he's facing 30 years in prison. And what does he do? He does what he always does. He sells. He sold out his partners, sold out his friends, sold out his employees. He wore a wire for the FBI and gave them everyone. And for that, he gets a sentence of just 22 months. His victims, on the other hand, got a life sentence of financial ruin.
Now, the court ordered him to pay back $110 million to the people he scammed. But to this day, almost none of it has been returned. It's just vanished, gone into a tangled mess of offshore accounts and legal tricks.
And then comes the final twist. While he's serving his short sentence in what was basically a cushy minimum security prison, his cellmate was the comedian Tommy Chong, from Cheech and Chong. Chong heard all of Belfort's insane stories and told him, "Man, you should write a book." And just like that, Jordan Belfort, the ultimate salesman, found his next big thing to sell, his own story.
And this quote from the man himself really says it all, doesn't it? There's zero remorse. He never really apologized. Instead, he just blamed the system, blamed a greedy culture, basically saying, hey, everybody's greedy, I just acted on it. He managed to rebrand his crimes as just a relatable human weakness.
So that leaves us with one last, really uncomfortable question. This guy, who ran one of the biggest scams in modern history, became a motivational speaker, a pop culture hero, the star of a huge movie. He didn't just get away with it, he made even more money off of it. So the question is, why do we still cheer for the wolf? That's something to think about.